Coming up, ladies and gentlemen, we submit to you the 10th worst loss in NBA history. The Brooklyn Nets go down against the Clippers. The tank is back on. Why can't they just follow the script against the teams that matter most, like the Blazers? We dive into this incredible Clippers loss coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbrecht. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We are 100% free on all those great platforms, and let you know that from the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. And Doug, oh my goodness. Now, we said that this was going to be a rough season. And we also said that they need to lose games against teams like the Blazers. They messed that up. But to come back on the West Coast trip, take on the Clippers, and put up what I'm going to call bold, because it's a strategy, certainly, Cotton. 67 points, 126 to 67. This is like youth basketball scores here. The Brooklyn Nets lose on the road, and I think this will be one of those symbolic kind of games relative to the year, to the tank, and to what this team is trying to accomplish. But even at that, this is one of the more ugly losses that we'll talk about this season, or I should say, in NBA history.
Yeah, I mean, it really doesn't get much worse than that. Like the biggest victory or biggest margin of victory in a game ever is the Grizzlies won by 73 against OKC back in 2021. So 59 points, falls all the way tied for the top 10. So nice job by the Nets there for not getting into all the way into the top 10 of.
Well,
just
you got to respect yourself, right?
Yeah, but when you go into a game without D'Angelo Russell, without Cam Thomas, without Cameron Johnson, right? Like without Claxton played, but barely. When you go in with all these guys, without these guys, like you just don't have ways to score. We actually talked about this on the podcast previous, where this is what D'Angelo Russell sort of provided for the team, was this ability to sort of like control an offense, dribble, like things that you kind of need to be able to do at an NBA level. And they went into this game without any of those things. And sometimes you're going to shoot 44% from three, and next game you're going to shoot 18% from three. And when you shoot 18% from three, you're going to get, absolutely boat raced right out of the arena. So really, really tough loss. I think that what it probably annoys Nets fans is that in terms of like sort of leverage, if you were going to sit all these guys, the game to sit them against was the Blazers, where you might be tied for lottery odds getting toward the end. And they're like, nah, we're going to beat that team. So this is the part where even when they do it, they don't do it right. And I think this is probably the part that drives Nets fans crazy, is that even when you're doing it, they can't even do the right thing correctly. And it's just so annoying.
Oh, yeah. And we're coming off the heels of Sean Marks saying we're going to have to be strategic, and it's not going to necessarily be about what's most important to helping win games. And last night is an example of that. They did not do what was the most important thing to possibly win a game against the Clippers. But as you mentioned, the game prior, they bring back both D'Angelo Russell and Cam Johnson to a game against the team that is right there with you in the tank odds, that if you were to beat them, which you did, you'd end up taking a step back from 6th to 7th in those odds. So to your point about, I don't know how, as an organization, you can come out and publicly say, we are tanking, and that is the agenda. And then in the very next two games, demonstrate that you might not know the best way to go about tanking, or that you might not understand where you are in the odds, the teams that you're playing against. You could have played D'Angelo Russell and Cameron Johnson tonight. And Cam Thomas, will put him in there as well, even though he hasn't been on the court in a while. You could have played all of them last night and lost that game against the Clippers, because the Clippers are a decent team. Like, whether or not they're got the championship odds they once did, they are a good team. They're winning basketball games. But instead, you put them out there on the court against a roster that's as bad or worse than you. So that part of it has to be absolutely infuriating for the fan base to turn around and say, great, so you got that loss, and you could have just flip-flopped this and been just as bullish about the timeline going forward. Because as we talked about as well, not to go long, They had 2 games against Utah and Portland that were critical to where they were in the tank. And then coming out of that, they have the Clippers, and they have the Suns, and they have the Lakers, and they have the Knicks coming back when they get to the East Coast. They had all these games that no matter, even if you played Cam Johnson and Cam Thomas comes back and D'Angelo Russell, still going to be really hard to get those wins. And this continues to be that theme of you are going to win the wrong games occasionally and put yourself in an absolutely brutal spot. And that's exactly what this crystallized last night. And 67 points, for crying out loud, like, let alone 67 points in this game is insane, even by the roster that you put out there on the court.
Oh, I mean, it's like it's got to be also one of the lowest in like the modern basketball, especially. I mean, they definitely, I'll look this up, I know, when we get a break here, but definitely like in the 2000s, like since like the three ball.
God, by today's NBA, yeah, by 10, with the way the game is played today, 67 points.
Like pace is way up, 3-pointers are way up, which is why the scores get driven up, right? Those are the 2 things that are going to lead to higher scores. So 67 points is sort of in what I would call like the modern analytics, just basically 3-pointers, like version of basketball, is kind of almost impossible to do. It's impossible to do, mostly because if you scored this and if you saw they weren't able to do this last night, usually what happens in these situations is the other team's winning by so much that they stop trying. And then when they stop trying, you kind of just like catch up a little bit. You catch up a little bit, you make some shots, everything gets a little easier. Nope, Nets couldn't even do that part. 16 points in the fourth quarter when they were losing by 1,000. So, like, that's
by the way, I should point out this game was tied 21 apiece after the first. But the Nets put up, 21, which is low. They held the Clippers. I mean, let's be honest, but they held it. It's 21 points. So they had to really make that hard effort defensively, especially to give up 37 and then 44 in the third quarter. And almost to your point, I mean, the Clippers did take their foot off the gas. It was only a 24-point fourth quarter for them. So they combined for the first and fourth quarters to only put up 45 points and yet still scored 126. The Brooklyn Nets could not crack that 16-point mark in any of the next 3 quarters. It's almost laughable just in the result. And I find it really I find it hard to wrap my head around how this team is going to approach games going forward now. There's a lot of things we want to get to here, though, including whether or not this team was ever going to win that game last night. The lineup decision from Jordi Fernandez, I would say, falls into the category of interesting. And I do want to get into that and also some of these performances, especially the 3-point shooting, as Doug pointed out. We'll get into all that here coming up in just one moment.
All right, before we get to that, tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet at $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win the first bet. That's $300 to keep that action going. Look, the FanDuel app is so easy to navigate. So many different bets out there. Keep things, live bets, keep it exciting. Got a packed weekend of NFL action with the playoffs this weekend. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around for your winnings, whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs. FanDuel has you covered. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. Get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
And when you're done with that, you got to go and check out our friends over at Skims, because when I found Skims and was making underwear for men, I was, call me intrigued. I've also heard so much about their quality from friends and family. It's so hard to not say you're going to give it a try. Let me tell you why. Honestly, I've had issues with underwear from fit and comfort or just finding the right style for me. Also, maybe keeping my underwear a little bit too long. So Skims changed all of that. Their men's line offers something for everyone, from boxer briefs to classic briefs, all designed with the perfect balance of comfort and style. So go ahead and shop Skims for men at skims.com/LockedOnNBA and Skims stores. Let them know that we sent you. After you place your order, select podcast in the survey and select our show. That's the Locked On Nets podcast in the drop-down menu that follows. Go ahead and get over to skims.com/LockedOnNBA today. All right, so as we continue today's Locked On Nets episode, tying a pretty little bow on a beautiful game. Just a lovely display of athleticism. 126-67, losing to the LA Clippers. Now, here's my thing. We're going to get into some of the other stat categories here in terms of the point total for the Nets as well that Doug has. But the starting lineup of Zaire Williams, Noah Clowney, Nicholas Claxton, Tyrese Martin, and Keon Johnson. Now, you mentioned at the top, it's not like everyone goes ahead and runs massive minutes here. It's only 17 minutes for Claxton before he's taken out. He goes 1 of 7 from the field. Only 22 minutes for Noah Clowney. And maybe just a reminder that when you're young and you don't have facilitators on the court, you can run into issues like Noah Clowney maybe did. 1 of 6, 0 of 4 from deep. Zaire Williams struggles as well. But when you go down into the bench and you think about a Jalen Wilson, you think about, it's Daron Sharp that actually pulls a bit of the line here, and even Tosan. I'm not knocking Jordy Fernandez in this, by the way, as the light fixtures go out inside of my studio, if you're watching over on YouTube. But do you question at all the way that the lineup gets constructed here when you're thinking about a game like this? Understanding you're not going to win the game, but in terms of having a balanced lineup, I don't think about throwing out that starting 5 necessarily. And I'm a little surprised about Jalen Wilson, who still played the most minutes, second most minutes behind Tyrese Martin. I'm surprised that he's not getting inserted into the starting lineup in games like these when you don't have Johnson on the court, especially.
No, I'm not really surprised. I think this is basically what I would do. I think you need probably a little bit more on the ball bounce with Tyrese Martin that Jalen Wilson doesn't give you. You need the 3-4-5 defensively with Zaire, Clowney, Claxton. Keon Johnson's just kind of hung around. He's been like starter sort of in like name fashion only at times because like he's been starting, but the minutes haven't been super overwhelming. So I don't know. I'm not really that surprised. Again, this is like shuffling the deck chairs in the Titanic around situation because I don't think it would have made. I mean, what do they do? Maybe they start Jalen Wilson and they score 72 instead of 67. So I don't think
that may have mattered. That may have been all the difference in the world, Doug. Those 5 points could have really changed the world.
You know, Clowney ends up getting ejected. We could talk about that a little bit too, like sort of like where, you know, what that is. But I did look up real quick that fewest points in an NBA game. This is the 20 since 2010. So, you know, basically since people start shooting, you know, a lot of threes and then even more lately. But since 2010, this is the 25th least amount of points scored in a game. And that's the least. This might be the least amount since 2000. Oh, wow. Yeah. This is the least amount since 2018. So the last 7 years, this is the fewest number of points scored in the NBA. That's impressive. Not easy to do. Not easy to do. Like that's a certain level of ineptitude to be able to just do the least with the least is basically what they ended up doing. I just snorted. God, my voice is so terrible. Apologies for everyone that's having to listen to this. But yeah, this is I'm here right. We probably actually underrated to start the show just how bad a performance it was. And by the way, it's not like if you watched it looked just as bad. It wasn't one of these things where it was like, oh, you know, getting unlucky or a few calls going your way or get against them. That wasn't the case here. I mean, they were just trucked basically, like you said, from the first quarter on. And the first quarter didn't even look that good. It's just the Clippers just weren't really making shots. So I don't know. These are the kind of games that when you were a fan, you were fearful of when you heard they were going to go into the tank, because this is the kind of thing you just like, there's no reason to stay up late or God forbid this had been at home, like go to a game like this. Like it's embarrassing. But I also get it. Yeah.
No, I got to tell you, because I mean, that's a part of this that we've talked about a lot. The Nets are 9-15 on the road this season. So that makes them hard math 5-12 at home. And this is on the road and it is a tank season and it's all good. But like, this is also a part that does bother. Like, I know that fans get bothered by this. Like, there is a difference between losing games and it being exciting or interesting or entertaining, and then getting absolutely dumpstered by, you know, getting doubled up effectively. When the Nets have games like this at home, you're going to get vibes from the fan base, regardless of whether or not the majority of the fans understand what the goal is here and having a top pick and all that stuff. When you show up at Barclays Center and you get beat 120 something to 75 to 85, even 85 points, right? You could give the Nets 20 more points and losing 126 to 87 against the Clippers at home. You're going to get boos, like, you know, and the fan base is going to start to get vocal about that. And I always find that to be a really hard dynamic, right? Because there is the overall plan of the season and what you want to accomplish, but then there's the other side of it. Hey, we got the kids together. We went ahead. We went out to a game. It's going to be a little bit of a late night. They're going to be tired in the morning. School's going to be a real problem, but that's okay, because experiences like this matter for a father and a son, for an entire family. And then you take them out and your kid starts crying after the second quarter because the team is an absolute joke. And by the way, none of the players that you're there to see are actually on the floor. Like, I think.
Well, I was going to say, did you explain to your kid that that's Reese Beekman? Like, maybe that's like
to be fair. Make
maybe
sure
that's you
that
doing
you
a bad job
understand.
as a parent. If you aren't explaining to him that that's Reese Beekman right there. So
Yeah, 100%. But you know what I mean? So like there is that side of it, I think, that is the push and pull. And that's why when we talk about Sean Marks coming out and saying, yeah, we're going to make strategic decisions, you're like, wow, okay, that's part of why it is a bold statement to make publicly, because it tells everybody when you show up to our arena, which we want you to come to, and we want you to buy all this stuff. And no, we're not going to lower the prices in the second half of the season just because we're scoring half the amount of normal NBA teams. We're still going to charge you full freight, right? Like that's a hard thing to do, and then come out and go, and this is the product you're getting. Like, so, and we said this all year long about other teams and trust the process in Philly or the Detroit Pistons and what they've gone through. Like, when you watch those teams from afar, I think it's always easier to say, oh my God, we should just tank. It'll be great for us. We'll solve all our problems, until you're in it and you're watching your team score 67 points on a Wednesday night.
yeah, exactly. Like until you have to roll through 82 like that.
Yep.
It's a hard thing to do. Like, the math works probability wise. This is what you should do if you want to get the highest pick in the draft. This is what you should do. The best players, on average, everyone comes in with this. On average, the best players get drafted high in the draft. Yes, not all of them get high in the draft, I'm aware, but the mode on the best top 50 players in the league, the mode is basically the first pick, which means if you want your best chance to have a great player in your team, you should basically, I think the median is like top 5. You should pick very, very high in the draft. This is like the math is solved on this. I've not saved the Giannis and Jokic comments for somewhere else, because I'm talking about like everybody in the NBA. So you have to do this, but like you said, you know, what you're not aware of, or what you're aware of but you haven't seen in practice, is the games where you're going to have your starting lineup score 4, 4, 2, 8, and 6 points total for a whole game. Numbers. That was Zaire 4, Noah Clowney 4, Claxton 2. We'll talk about him tomorrow. He's been terrible. Tyrese Martin 8, Keon Johnson 6. That's your starting lineup in an NBA game. That's the part they don't tell you. That's the part they don't tell you about on the pro tank thing. Now, you have to have a steady hand and you have to be okay with it, because it is correct. But I can see why organizations don't want to lean all the way into this, because this is, I mean, how do you sell this in the merch store? Like, you just can't. Like, you just can't at all.
9 of 32 is that combined starting lineup. Coming up here in a second, let's talk about Noah Clowney. He gets knocked out of this game on a back-to-back technicals. It's a little bit of the Nick Claxton influence. We're going to talk more about him on tomorrow's episode as we think about what his short and long-term future is in a rough season, certainly to say the least. But when we think about not having Cam Johnson, not having D'Angelo Russell in this lineup, I have a very specific question when it comes to making sure you do tank and how the Nets should approach that. We'll get into it to close things out in just one moment. All right, before we do that, I got to tell you our friends over at Robinhood Gold, because now you can enjoy the VIP treatment, receiving a 3% IRA match on retirement contributions. The privileges of the very privileged are no longer exclusive. With Robinhood Gold, your annual IRA contributions are boosted by 3%, plus you also get 4% APY on your cash and non-retirement accounts. That's over 8 times the national savings average. The perks of the high net worth are now available for any net worth. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. To receive your 3% boost on your annual IRA contribution, sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold at a $5 a month for 1 year from first match. Must keep funds in IRA for 5 years. Go to Robinhood.com/boost. Over 8 times the national average savings account interest rate. Claim is based on data from the FDIC as of November 18th, 2024. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold LLC. All right. So here's the thing, Doug, as we close out today's Locked On Nets episode, reminding everybody that no matter how much the Nets suck, we're always going to be here, absolutely crushing it. Example, Doug can barely even speak. He sounds like a frog, but he's here and he's doing the work, because that's what matters. When we think about no D'Angelo Russell, no Cam Johnson, we know the Cam Johnson.
Not going to be here tomorrow, by the way. You forgot that I'm not going to be here tomorrow, so good job by you. Sorry to interrupt you. Keep going.
Just to be clear, totally dedicated. And if something comes up, maybe one of us won't be here. But the show will go on. The show will always, the show will always.
Adam will do the show. I'm just kind of busy. Yeah, but that's.
So, when we talk about Cam Johnson getting traded, he'll be gone. D'Angelo Russell. So here's the big question. If you could, because he's making the money's a little bit high. Yeah, the buyout could happen, but would he really want that? And would the Nets really want to do that? Fine. Would you basically take an old leather shoe from a team that wanted D'Angelo Russell? If the premise is we want to make sure we tank, well, guess what? Get him off this team. And we know that Ben Simmons, he also has the ability to facilitate, but it's not the same thing. We talked about it ad nauseum all year long. But when you saw D'Angelo pop in for one game against the Blazers, it was so night and day about what this offense looks like that there is the world. If Sean Marks is a man of his word, take anything for D'Angelo Russell, throw him to the wind and go, yeah, great. We'll see what happens for a player that we like in Tyrese Martin and a player that we're fond of in Keon Johnson have to keep running the backcourt tandem down the stretch of this season.
I think I would probably I think if they trade Cam Johnson and then just like limit minutes from here on out, I can't imagine D'Angelo Russell like wins them tons of games. I do think that we talked about this before. I do think there's like great value in having him for the bigs because these bigs just get such short shrift here. Like they have no one that can get to the ball. They have no one that can get into the lane. They have no one that can run pick and roll. They have no one that can get no one that can even get into threaten into the mid range. And then what happens with that is you get these guys just have terrible shots. Like Claxton's looks are terrible. He can't get to the rim. Clowney can't get to the rim, although he hasn't been doing that tons anyway. Like you kind of do need some kind of point guard. So not like D'Angelo Russell's the only guy that can do it, but he's the only one on this roster that can. So I'm a little torn because I do think when we talk about development doesn't just mean roll the balls out and you run around on the court for your minutes. That's not development. Like playing time is not development. Playing time is not development. Like development is systematic approaches to getting better. And there are some, Day'Ron Sharpe too. There are some guys that just do need other people to get better, specifically bigs. This is why we, think back to what we talk about in the summer league. It's like, it's going to be tough to look great in the summer league if you're a big because it's up and down the court. You got to you're not really running like great offenses.
Guys that facilitate aren't facilitating in the summer league because they're trying to show off how good they can be offensively.
So that's where D'Angelo Russell, I think, is important for these other guys because I think everyone thinks development just means, your playing time goes up. But if you have no one that can like unlock the things and get you better around that stuff, then it's kind of all for naught. So I'm torn on that one. I think there's pretty good reasons and it's really about the bigs to keep him around, and it's like not the worst thing in the world if they just trade him because he is a floor raiser.
Yeah, and by the way, and I agree with you, right? Like this is more about, and so the two sides of the coin. Are you really going to win more games with D'Angelo Russell? Well, probably not, but you might win that odd game against the Blazers, and that's a problem, right? If he's playing for you, maybe that is. Let's just minute the minutes there, his minutes in those games, and we'll go ahead and give ourselves a chance to lose effectively. But the other side of it is the development, and I agree with you because we've seen this before. When you don't have a team so we're going to look back at Day'Ron Sharpe, who still is a question mark, even a Noah Clowney, he's being talked about so much on the perimeter these days. So the game doesn't seem as tied to point guard play as maybe we would have thought about it if he was going to be someone who's running the court, trying to space the floor out, getting towards the basket more often. But it does matter. So I totally agree with you. It's more just about if you want to be tanking, then this is the way that you need to go. Interestingly enough, another guy that I think obviously would benefit from it, but Jalen Wilson played 34 minutes. He went 5 of 10, only 1 of 4 from beyond the arc, got to the line 5 times, knocked those down, 16 points. Like I've been, as we've been, I think all year with him, impressed that his game just seems to be at a higher level than maybe we anticipated, where he can go out there on the court without Cam Johnson, without D'Angelo Russell, without Ben Simmons, right? People to set the table a little bit without a lot of shooting talent around him. He still went out and in his minutes was able to get something done, which I think is impressive for him, but also feeds right into what you're talking about with having a point guard, right? Still matters to have guys to facilitate that. Little trivia here for you, Doug. Don't look at the box score. Do you know let's start with who had the worst plus minus in this game?
The worst plus minus? I'm going to say Tyrese Martin because he played the most minutes.
First of all, that's smart. Do you see what I'm talking about here? He's not going to be here tomorrow, guys, but we can still think about how smart Doug Norrie is. Minus 56 for Tyrese Martin in his 37 minutes of action. Now, there's someone who played real minutes here, but who had the best plus minus differential here?
It's probably got to be someone off the bench.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to say not Jalen Wilson because he played a ton. Not really trying. This is good podcasting. I'm going to say, I'll say Beekman.
So, okay, listen. And I'm going to give you a credit for it because while Dariq Whitehead in 9 minutes had a -4, Reese Beekman in 21 minutes of action, a -6. So when you bring your kids to the arena at Barclays one night, you say, hey, remember that game back on January 15th? Reese Beekman was the only man holding it down, kids. Remember that name. He could be big. I just, maybe it's just tying a bow on this last night's action. The idea of going through, because yeah, -56 seems like a big number until you read off -41, -44, -38, -35, -35 for Jalen Wilson in his 34 minutes of action, -24 for Tosan in 29. Like, it's just, you don't see numbers like this in an NBA game because it's almost impossible to play that bad in the margins. And yet here we are. So I just wanted to make sure we really drove that point home because it is bothering me.
Just lodge something there. -56 is really something. I actually want to look if that might be the worst single game. I don't know if I'm going to be able I might be able to search for this quickly. Okay.
Go ahead and take a look at it, though, because I'll remind everybody, by the way, that we did talk about how coming up, Lakers will be next. That's going to be on Friday night, 10:30 action out there on the West Coast. Another opportunity for this team to certainly lose another basketball game. I actually didn't pull up because the one thing I always think about, which we should be doing more of, is watching some of these other teams. We had mentioned about Utah, but if you go and look at Portland, who actually had won some basketball games in their last 10 before the Nets knocked them off, they will be taking on, one-to-one comparison, the Clippers tonight for the Portland Trailblazers. So we'll know exactly where they stand in the pecking order. And if for any reason the Blazers come out and beat the Clippers, it'll just further disgust everyone involved in this operation. But they'll have Houston, Chicago, Miami, Orlando, Charlotte, a lot of road games there for them at the back end of January, and then finishing out nearly the month with OKC and with Milwaukee. So, in the old tank hierarchy, you take the step back, and 5-6 games later, you see all it takes is the odd win for another team to flip you back into the right order.
I got it, by the way. It was not the worst ever. It was the third worst ever. The third worst. It's tied. There's a bonkers stat on this. So Scoot Henderson has the worst one at a -58 from last year. But Scoot Henderson is also tied for third with Tyrese Martin. He's got it twice. Scoot Henderson is two of the top three. He was a -58. He was a -58 on March 29th last year.
Yeah,
and then he was -56, which ties with Tyrese Martin in January 11th for last year. That is, what Scoot? My goodness, to have it twice on there. So anyway, Tyrese Martin tied for the third worst all time. Plus minus in a single game. Really a testament to Tyrese. Well, follow me here.
Yeah.
It's a testament to Tyrese Martin because the only way you can get this is your coach trusts you enough to keep you on the court long enough.
That's
so it's one thing to just, all of us could go out there and have the worst plus minus ever. I could go out there right now and put up a -300 probably pretty easily. Or it would be something like that, -200 if they just let me run around for 37 minutes. The testament that the coach trusts you enough to leave you out there in a -56 performance. That's a compliment for Tyrese Martin. So there you go. We'll end this thing on a positive note.
The idea with full athletic NBA players around me, the idea of trying to run for 37 minutes on an NBA
But
court.
you wouldn't make it 90 seconds. I'm being honest. If you were trying your
absolute to put me out there. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, by the way, feel free. You put yourself in this category too. No one needs to know if I'm doughier than you, but you put every John Q public out there. Think about being on an NBA court.
That's not what I was going to say. I put myself right in the category. I'm right with you. It's not that. It's that exactly what button to push for me to get me to go absolutely just do 22 straight minutes of being annoyed at people that think it would be anything more than the most embarrassing moment of their whole life. I'm right with you. I wasn't going to say I'd be -182 and you'd be you out of shape loser would be -200. No, it's not.
By the way, let's we're gonna get out of here, and you can get us on YouTube. I'm gonna take care of this for Doug because he's been a hero showing up here. He's drinking probably some tea right there, keeping his throat nice and warm. Get us on YouTube where you get your podcast needs. Subscribe, podcast feeds. Get us over on X at Doug Norrie, at Adam Armbrecht. I do it perfectly. I execute brilliantly. When I was in college, when I first went, friends of mine on a weekend after, let's say, a night of drinking or just reading books and studying late, We went over to what was an Olympic-sized pool. We said we're going to do laps. I had friends that were 6'7", and we're swimming, and I'm doing it, buddy, all 5'8" of me. And we got out of there, toweled off, walked out front, and I promptly threw up in the nearest garbage can. It was insane, and that was when I learned the lesson. Don't athletics. That's to watch, baby. You don't need to get too involved with it.
The worst thing you can do is try.
Yeah, the point is, I tried and I expelled everything in my body in the process. All right. Solo show tomorrow for me. We'll talk about that Lakers game. We're going to talk maybe a little bit about Nicholas Claxton, may even push that to next week because that's the kind of conversation that both Doug and I want to be angry about. So we may do a little bit of trade chatter as well. That being the case, my friends, we do want to let you know that the great empire will be torn from limb, the all-powerful one for more than 400 years, great power given to the dark one from all below. And that was Nostradamus. I believe he also had predictions somewhere in there about NBA games and all-time losses.
Well, he predicted Tyrese Martin minus 56 will be one of the all-time great poets. We'll be back in tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball, yeah.